If you have to argue to prove your point, does that mean you're already weak? Imagine this. Two powerful figures are at a crossroads, faced with a choice that will define their legacies. One relies on their sharp wit, delivering persuasive speeches and weaving together seemingly irrefutable arguments. Their words captivate the audience, creating an illusion of power through logic and rhetoric. The other figure, however, stands silent, not because they lack the ability to speak, but because they don't need to. They act decisively, letting their results speak louder than any argument ever could. No justifications are offered, no explanations demanded, only the quiet confidence of action. The world watches these two figures. The first draws applause and admiration for their eloquence, their mastery of words and ideas. Yet, as time passes, it is the second figure, the one who acted without debate, who carves a lasting impression. Their silence becomes a symbol of strength, their actions a legacy. While one relies on persuasion to validate their position, the other proves their position through undeniable outcomes. This dichotomy is not confined to the annals of history or the pages of philosophy. It plays out daily, in boardrooms, courtrooms, and even on social media. Consider the chaos of a heated online debate. Someone meticulously crafts a long thread of arguments, peppered with citations, analogies, and impassioned reasoning to establish their intellectual dominance. Their opponent, however, responds not with counterpoints but with action, a bold decision, a groundbreaking innovation, or a decisive withdrawal that renders the debate irrelevant. Who, then, truly holds the power in this exchange? Friedrich Nietzsche, one of the most radical and provocative thinkers in modern philosophy, believed that those who rely on arguments to validate their beliefs are not strong but weak. For Nietzsche, strength lies in instinct, confidence, and the ability to act without the need for external approval or rationalization. The moment we feel compelled to argue, to justify ourselves through dialectics, Nietzsche contends that we reveal a lack of inner certainty, a crack in the armor of self-assurance. It is a confession of insecurity, a reliance on reason as a crutch for what should be instinctive. This idea is perhaps most powerfully embodied in Nietzsche's critique of Socrates, the father of Western rationality. Socrates, with his incessant questioning and relentless pursuit of rational justification, became for Nietzsche the very image of weakness, a man who relied on arguments to subvert the instincts of his more instinctive contemporaries. But what does this mean for us today? In a world dominated by debate, from politics to personal relationships, is Nietzsche's critique still relevant? Can we reframe our understanding of strength, moving away from an over-reliance on argumentation and embracing the quiet power of decisive action? In this exploration, we'll unravel Nietzsche's provocative argument that debating is often a refuge for the powerless. We'll examine why he considered reason and dialectics the tools of the weak, contrast this with the instinctive confidence of action, and challenge the ways we understand power, influence, and strength in both philosophy and daily life. By the end, we might just find ourselves questioning whether the time we spend arguing would be better spent acting. Nietzsche's disdain for argumentation as a form of weakness is one of his most provocative and enduring ideas. At its core, Nietzsche believed that the reliance on logic, dialectics, and reason reveals a lack of inherent strength. For him, the need to justify one's position through debate or rationalization indicates an absence of the raw power and instinct necessary to assert one's will without question. This perspective challenges not only how we understand strength, but also the fundamental role of reasoning in human civilization. Nietzsche viewed argumentation as a tool of those who lack the authority or capacity to act decisively. He argued that when someone is truly powerful, they do not need to convince others of their validity. They simply exist and act in a way that makes persuasion unnecessary. This critique is powerfully encapsulated in his assessment of Socrates, whom Nietzsche saw as a symbol of cultural decay in ancient Greece. For Nietzsche, Socrates embodied the decline of Greek vitality because he replaced instinct and action with endless questioning and the pursuit of rational justification. Socrates' method of probing and debating, though revolutionary, represented a shift away from the confident, instinct-driven culture of pre-Socratic Greece. It was, in Nietzsche's view, a move towards self-doubt and over-intellectualization. To understand Nietzsche's critique, consider the natural world. In nature, power is expressed through action, not argument. A lion does not pause to justify why it hunts. It simply hunts. There is no questioning of its right to kill or its instinct to dominate. The lion's actions are self-validating. This is the essence of Nietzsche's view of strength. It is instinctual, immediate, and unapologetic. Humans, on the other hand, have developed a tendency to intellectualize and rationalize their behaviors, which Nietzsche saw as a deviation from this natural strength. For him, this need for justification was not progress but a symptom of weakness, a loss of the primal force that once defined humanity's greatness. This idea is vividly illustrated in Nietzsche's reading of the Melian Dialogue, a historical account recorded by Thucydides during the Peloponnesian War. The dialogue recounts the confrontation between Athens and the island of Melos, where the Athenians demanded surrender, threatening total destruction if the Melians resisted. The Athenians did not engage in philosophical justifications or moral arguments. Instead, they bluntly stated their position. The strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must. For Nietzsche, this was a quintessential example of strength in action. The Athenians did not feel the need to rationalize their aggression or appeal to higher principles. They acted out of their power and confidence. This historical example contrasts sharply with the modern tendency to rely on debates, arguments, and justifications as the primary means of asserting one's position. Nietzsche would argue that this reliance is a sign of a broader cultural shift toward weakness. In contemporary society, we see this dynamic play out in various ways. Consider modern leadership. Strong leaders often act decisively, cutting through bureaucracy and hesitation to make bold decisions. Leaders like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos exemplify this approach. Musk, for instance, frequently makes headlines not for his public debates, but for his ability to take risks and deliver groundbreaking innovations. Similarly, Bezos revolutionized global commerce through bold, strategic actions rather than lengthy justifications or public persuasion. In contrast, weaker leaders or individuals often rely on argumentation to mask their indecision or lack of authority. Endless meetings, prolonged debates, and convoluted explanations can become substitutes for decisive action. This phenomenon is not limited to corporate boardrooms. It is evident in personal interactions and, most strikingly, in the realm of social media. Online platforms have become arenas for debate, where users engage in lengthy exchanges to prove their intellectual superiority. However, as Nietzsche might observe, these debates rarely lead to meaningful outcomes. Instead, they often reflect a desperate need for validation, a symptom of insecurity and a lack of inherent power. Nietzsche's critique of argumentation challenges us to rethink the role of reason and debate in our lives. While reason is often celebrated as a hallmark of human progress, Nietzsche saw it as a double-edged sword. On one hand, it has enabled incredible advancements in science, philosophy, and technology. On the other hand, an over-reliance on reason can lead to paralysis and self-doubt. When every decision must be justified, every action debated, and every belief scrutinized, the result can be a kind of cultural and personal stagnation. Nietzsche believed that this over-intellectualization saps the vitality from individuals and societies, replacing the boldness of instinct with the hesitancy of overthinking. This critique does not mean that Nietzsche dismissed all forms of reasoning or dialogue. Rather, he challenged the assumption that argumentation is the highest or most valid form of expressing power. For Nietzsche, true strength lies in the ability to act decisively without the need for external validation. This does not mean acting recklessly, but rather acting with such confidence and clarity of purpose that justification becomes unnecessary. It is a strength rooted in instinct and self-assurance, a strength that transcends the need for debate. The implications of Nietzsche's critique are profound, particularly in the context of modern life. We live in a world where arguments and justifications are often seen as essential to legitimacy. Whether in politics, business, or personal relationships, The ability to debate and reason is highly valued. However, Nietzsche's perspective invites us to question whether this emphasis on argumentation truly reflects strength, or whether it masks a deeper insecurity. Are we, as individuals and as a society, relying too much on reason to the detriment of action? To embrace Nietzsche's vision of strength, we must cultivate a deeper connection to our instincts and a willingness to act without fear of judgment. This does not mean abandoning reason altogether, but recognizing its limitations. Reason should serve as a tool to enhance our power, not as a crutch to compensate for its absence. By shifting our focus from argumentation to action, we can reclaim the vitality and confidence that Nietzsche saw as essential to true strength. Nietzsche's critique of argumentation as a weapon of the weak is not merely a condemnation of debate. It is a call to re-evaluate our understanding of power, strength, and action. It challenges us to move beyond the need for external validation and to find the courage to act decisively and unapologetically. In a world increasingly dominated by arguments and justifications, Nietzsche's philosophy offers a powerful reminder that true strength lies not in what we say but in what we do. Socrates, the so-called gadfly of Athens, is one of the most celebrated figures in Western philosophy. His relentless questioning and commitment to rational inquiry are often heralded as the foundation of modern thought. However, for Friedrich Nietzsche, Socrates was not a savior of reason, but a harbinger of cultural decay. Nietzsche's critique of Socrates is rooted in the idea that his obsession with argumentation and rational justification marked the beginning of a decline in instinct, vitality, and the natural confidence of human existence. For Nietzsche, Socrates represents the symbolic shift from a life of instinctive strength to a life of intellectualized weakness. Socrates was famous for his method of engaging others in dialogue, particularly those in positions of power and influence. He would question their beliefs, dissecting their assumptions and forcing them to confront the inconsistencies in their reasoning. On the surface, this might seem like a noble endeavor. After all, isn't the unexamined life not worth living, as Socrates himself proclaimed? However, Nietzsche saw this as something far less noble. To him, Socrates' endless questioning revealed a deeper insecurity within Greek culture, a culture that, up until that point, had been defined by its instinctive confidence and unapologetic vitality. The Greeks before Socrates, Nietzsche argued, were a people of action. Their culture thrived on instinct and strength, valuing beauty, power, and excellence without the need for rational justification. Their art, their politics, and their way of life were expressions of this unshakable confidence. But Socrates disrupted this natural flow. He introduced doubt where there had been certainty, and he demanded rational explanations for what had previously been taken as self-evident truths. For Nietzsche, this shift was not progress but a symptom of cultural decline, a move away from the life-affirming instincts that had once defined Greek greatness. Nietzsche saw Socrates as a figure who weaponized argumentation to undermine the instincts of others. By forcing his interlocutors to justify their beliefs and actions, Socrates exposed the fragility of their convictions. But Nietzsche would ask, why should these convictions need justification at all? For him, the very act of questioning one's instincts is an admission of weakness. A truly strong person, in Nietzsche's view, does not need to justify their actions or beliefs. They simply act, driven by the force of their instincts and the confidence of their will. Socrates, by contrast, turned instinct into a problem. He made people question their natural inclinations, replacing the immediacy of action with the paralysis of endless deliberation. The consequences of Socrates' approach were far-reaching. His method of dialectics laid the groundwork for what Nietzsche called the tyranny of reason. This was a revolutionary shift in human thought, where everything had to be proven, justified, and rationalized. Instinct, intuition, and the natural flow of life were no longer enough. Instead, people became obsessed with finding reasons and constructing elaborate systems of thought to explain their actions and beliefs. Nietzsche saw this as a betrayal of life itself, a denial of the raw, unmediated energy that gives life its meaning and vitality. One of the most striking examples of Socrates' influence can be seen in the works of Euripides, a playwright whose tragedies reflect the intellectualized worldview that Socrates championed. Euripides was a contemporary of Socrates and is often regarded as one of the greatest tragedians of ancient Greece. However, Nietzsche criticized Euripides for what he saw as the Socratization of Greek tragedy. In earlier tragedies, such as those of Aeschylus and Sophocles, the characters acted out of instinct, driven by forces beyond their control. Their actions were not always rational, but they were deeply human, reflecting the raw power and unpredictability of life. Euripides, on the other hand, introduced a new kind of tragedy, one that was overly concerned with rational explanation and psychological motivation. In his plays, characters often engage in lengthy monologues, explaining their thoughts, feelings, and actions in painstaking detail. For Nietzsche, this emphasis on rationality and exposition diluted the power of tragedy. It replaced the visceral, instinctive energy of earlier works with a cerebral, over-intellectualized approach. Euripides' tragedies, influenced by Socratic thought, became less about the raw experience of life and more about dissecting it, analyzing it, and justifying it. This shift in Greek tragedy mirrors the broader cultural transformation that Socrates initiated. By placing reason and argumentation at the center of human life, Socrates changed the way people approached the world. Instead of living with confidence and acting on instinct, they began to question everything. They sought to explain and justify their existence, turning life into a problem to be solved rather than a force to be embraced. Nietzsche saw this as a profound loss, a move away from the life-affirming vitality of instinct and toward the life-denying paralysis of overthinking. The impact of Socrates' revolution extends far beyond ancient Greece. His emphasis on reason and justification has become a cornerstone of Western thought, shaping everything from philosophy to science to politics. While this legacy is often celebrated, Nietzsche invites us to consider its darker side. What if this relentless pursuit of reason has come at the expense of something more essential? What if, in our quest to rationalize and justify everything, we have lost touch with the instincts that once made us strong? Nietzsche's critique of Socrates is not merely an academic argument. It is a challenge to the way we live our lives. He asks us to reconsider the value of reason and to question whether our obsession with justification is truly a sign of strength or a symptom of weakness. In a world dominated by debates, arguments, and endless analysis, Nietzsche's insights are more relevant than ever. They remind us that true strength does not come from the ability to argue or explain, but from the ability to act with confidence and conviction. Socrates may have been the father of Western philosophy, but for Nietzsche, he was also the father of a kind of intellectualized weakness, a weakness that undermines the very instincts that make life worth living. To reclaim our strength, Nietzsche suggests, we must move beyond the legacy of Socrates and rediscover the power of instinct. We must learn to trust ourselves, to act without hesitation, and to live with the unshakable confidence that comes from embracing life as it is, rather than endlessly questioning it. Nietzsche's philosophy on instinct and strength delves into the raw essence of what it means to live powerfully. For Nietzsche, true strength comes not from intellectual justification or external validation, but from a deep, instinctual confidence that requires no explanation. This perspective challenges our modern fixation on rationality and invites us to embrace a more primal, unapologetic way of being. It's not about thinking your way to power. It's about being powerful, letting your instincts guide you, and acting with unshakable self-assurance. At the core of Nietzsche's idea is the belief that strength rooted in instinct is authentic and undeniable. He points to the natural world as the ultimate example of this concept. Consider a lion. It doesn't pause to question whether it's right to hunt or whether it has adequately justified its existence. It simply hunts because that's what it was made to do. Its strength is not up for debate. It is self-evident in its actions. For Nietzsche, this is the essence of true power, the ability to act decisively, without hesitation or the need for approval. Humans, however, often struggle with this instinctive clarity. Unlike the lion, we tend to overthink and overanalyze. We question our desires, second-guess our decisions, and seek validation from others to feel secure in our choices. Nietzsche saw this tendency as a sign of weakness. When we rely on endless deliberation and justification, we betray a lack of confidence in ourselves. Instead of trusting our instincts, we become paralyzed by doubt and the need for approval, a far cry from the natural, unshakable strength of the lion. This is where Nietzsche introduces his concept of master morality. In his view, master morality represents the ethos of those who live powerfully and confidently, guided by their instincts and unafraid to assert their will. It is a morality of strength, self-assurance, and self-creation. Masters do not look outside themselves for validation or follow rules imposed by others. Instead, they create their own values and live by them unapologetically. Their strength lies in their ability to define their lives on their own terms, without the need for justification. Master morality stands in stark contrast to what Nietzsche calls slave morality. While master morality is about self-assertion and instinct, slave morality arises from a place of weakness and resentment. It is the morality of those who lack the confidence to assert themselves, so they seek to undermine the strength of others. Rather than creating their own values, they define themselves in opposition to the powerful, framing humility, self-sacrifice, and obedience as virtues. Nietzsche saw this as a way for the weak to cope with their inability to rise above their circumstances, a morality born not out of strength but out of envy and fear. To understand how these concepts play out in the real world, consider the difference between visionary leaders and those who follow the status quo. Leaders like Elon Musk or Steve Jobs embody master morality. They are unafraid to break rules, challenge conventions, and carve out their own paths. Musk, for instance, didn't ask for permission to reimagine the automotive industry or to revolutionize space travel. He simply acted, driven by his instincts and his vision. Similarly, Jobs didn't rely on focus groups or surveys to create Apple's iconic products. He trusted his instincts and created what he believed in, often against the advice of others. Their success stems not from a need to justify their actions, but from their ability to act boldly and unapologetically. In contrast, slave morality is evident in those who cling to established norms and criticize innovation from the sidelines. These individuals often fear change and prefer to conform rather than take risks. They justify their inaction by framing it as prudence or humility. But Nietzsche would argue that this is merely a mask for their lack of confidence. Instead of creating their own values, they rely on the values imposed by society, avoiding the responsibility of self-creation. Nietzsche's distinction between master and slave morality challenges us to examine our own lives. Are we living according to our instincts, guided by our inner strength? Or are we caught in a cycle of doubt, constantly seeking validation and conforming to external expectations? The answer to these questions reveals whether we are embracing the power of master morality or succumbing to the weakness of slave morality. In practical terms, Nietzsche's philosophy encourages us to trust ourselves more deeply. It's about letting go of the need to justify our desires and decisions to others and instead acting with the confidence that comes from knowing our own worth. This doesn't mean acting recklessly or selfishly, but rather acting authentically, allowing our instincts to guide us toward what feels true and right for us. It's a call to reclaim the primal strength that lies within us, unburdened by the constraints of overthinking and external judgment. One of the most liberating aspects of master morality is its rejection of the need for universal rules. Nietzsche believed that each individual has the power to create their own values, tailored to their unique instincts and circumstances. This stands in stark contrast to the moral systems that dominate much of society, which often impose rigid standards of right and wrong. By embracing master morality, we free ourselves from these constraints and take ownership of our lives, defining success and fulfillment on our own terms. This philosophy is not without its challenges. Living by master morality requires a level of self-awareness and courage that many people find difficult to achieve. It means confronting our fears, rejecting societal expectations, and taking full responsibility for our choices. It's not an easy path, But Nietzsche would argue that it's the only path to true strength and fulfillment. By trusting our instincts and embracing our power, we can transcend the limitations of slave morality and live with the unshakable confidence of the lion. Ultimately, Nietzsche's philosophy on instinct and strength is a reminder of the power that lies within us. It challenges us to move beyond the need for justification and to live with the boldness and clarity of those who create their own values. In a world that often prioritizes rationality and conformity, Nietzsche's call to embrace our instincts and trust our inner strength is both radical and deeply empowering. It's an invitation to step into our power and live not as slaves to doubt and external validation, but as masters of our own destiny. In our modern, hyper-connected world, social media has become a battleground for opinions. Platforms like Twitter and Facebook are flooded daily with debates ranging from trivial topics to existential questions about society, politics, and morality. While this might seem like a triumph of free speech and open dialogue, Nietzsche would likely see it as a symptom of cultural weakness rather than strength. For him, the act of arguing, especially when detached from meaningful action, reveals a lack of confidence, authority, and instinctual power. In Nietzsche's terms, arguing is often the refuge of the insecure, a desperate attempt to validate one's position through external means rather than through decisive, impactful actions. Social media has amplified this phenomenon to an unprecedented scale. The anonymity and immediacy of these platforms have created an environment where anyone can participate in debates, regardless of their expertise or stake in the issue. On the surface, this democratization of discourse seems like a positive development. However, the reality is far more complex. Most social media arguments are not genuine attempts to seek truth or solve problems. Instead, they are performative displays of intellectual or moral superiority. Participants often care less about finding common ground and more about winning the argument or gaining likes, shares, and followers. Nietzsche would view this as a hollow exercise, a reliance on rhetoric to mask a lack of true strength or conviction. Consider the endless debates that rage on Twitter. A single post can spark a cascade of replies, retweets, and quote tweets, with users dissecting every word, challenging every claim, and introducing tangential arguments. These threads can go on for days, attracting hundreds or even thousands of participants. Yet, what do these debates accomplish? Rarely is a consensus reached, and even more rarely does the original poster or their critics change their minds. Instead, the debates often devolve into personal attacks, further entrenching divisions and animosities. From Nietzsche's perspective, these arguments are not signs of strength but of weakness. The participants, by engaging in endless debates, reveal their need for external validation. They are not content to hold their beliefs quietly and act upon them. Instead, they seek to prove their beliefs to others, to win approval, and to assert their superiority through words rather than deeds. This reliance on argumentation, Nietzsche would argue, betrays a lack of confidence in their instincts and a dependence on the opinions of others to feel secure in their positions. The performative nature of social media debates further underscores their weakness. Many users engage in arguments not because they are passionate about the issue, but because they want to be seen as knowledgeable, virtuous, or clever. They craft their responses with an audience in mind, seeking to impress their followers or humiliate their opponents. This kind of argumentation is far removed from the instinctive confidence that Nietzsche admired. It is a calculated performance, designed to elicit approval rather than to express genuine strength or conviction. In contrast to the cacophony of social media debates, Nietzsche would likely celebrate those who choose action over argument. True strength, in his view, does not require justification or validation. It manifests in decisive action, in the ability to create and achieve without the need for approval or agreement. While the weak argue, the strong act, and their actions speak louder than any words ever could. This distinction between argument and action is evident in the lives of impactful figures like Greta Thunberg. Thunberg has faced relentless criticism and debate, with skeptics challenging her knowledge, motives, and methods. Yet, she rarely engages in these arguments. Instead, She focuses on action, organizing climate strikes, delivering speeches, and inspiring millions to join her cause. Her strength lies not in her ability to outdebate her critics, but in her unwavering commitment to her mission. By refusing to be drawn into endless arguments, she demonstrates a Nietzschean confidence in her instincts and beliefs. Similarly, other influential figures throughout history have prioritized action over argument. Leaders like Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. understood that change is not achieved through debates, but through decisive, meaningful action. They did not waste their energy trying to win over every critic. Instead, they acted on their convictions, letting the power of their actions speak for itself. This is the kind of strength Nietzsche admired, a strength that does not rely on words but on deeds. The lesson here is clear. Action is more persuasive than argument. Words can be twisted, misunderstood, or ignored, but actions are undeniable. They have the power to inspire, to transform, and to create lasting change. In a world saturated with debates and opinions, those who choose to act stand out as beacons of true strength. They do not waste their energy trying to convince others of their worth or their rightness. They simply live their truth, confident in the knowledge that their actions will speak for themselves. This is not to say that argumentation has no place in society. Reasoned discourse can be valuable, especially in resolving conflicts or exploring complex ideas. However, Nietzsche's critique reminds us that arguments, when divorced from action, are hollow and performative. They become a way for the weak to feel powerful, a substitute for the confidence and decisiveness that true strength requires. In the modern world, where social media amplifies every voice and every opinion, Nietzsche's philosophy offers a powerful antidote to the noise. It challenges us to step away from the endless cycle of argumentation and to focus instead on what truly matters: our actions. Are we living according to our values? Or are we merely debating them? Are we acting on our convictions? Or are we seeking validation through words? These are the questions Nietzsche would ask us to consider. By choosing action over argument, we can reclaim our power and our confidence. We can move beyond the performative debates of social media and the endless need for validation, embracing instead the instinctive strength that lies within us. In a world that often prioritizes words over deeds, Nietzsche's philosophy reminds us that true strength is not found in what we say, but in what we do. Nietzsche's philosophy is often misunderstood as a wholesale rejection of debate, reason, and intellectual discourse. Yet, his critique is far more nuanced. Nietzsche did not dismiss all forms of argumentation. He recognized that reason and dialogue could be powerful tools when used appropriately. What he critiqued was the over-reliance on argument as a substitute for action, what he saw as the hallmark of those who lack the confidence to assert their will through decisive deeds. His work challenges us to reconsider the role of argument in our lives and to focus instead on the transformative power of action. At its core, Nietzsche's critique is not about rejecting rationality, but about recognizing its limits. He understood that debate and discourse could illuminate truths and sharpen understanding. However, he was deeply skeptical of arguments that were disconnected from the realities of life and the instincts that drive human action. For Nietzsche, arguments that existed purely in the abstract, detached from the concrete world of deeds, were symptoms of weakness. They revealed a kind of intellectual cowardice, a fear of committing to a course of action and letting the results speak for themselves. Nietzsche's philosophy invites us to reframe our understanding of strength. In his view, true strength does not require endless justification or external validation. It is not found in the cleverness of our arguments, but in the clarity of our actions. A truly powerful individual does not need to convince others of their rightness. They simply act, letting their deeds serve as the ultimate testament to their will and vision. This emphasis on action over argument is central to Nietzsche's message, and it resonates deeply in a world often paralyzed by overthinking and indecision. In practical terms, Nietzsche's distinction between argument and action challenges us to look at how we approach problems in our own lives. How often do we get caught in cycles of deliberation, endlessly debating the pros and cons of a decision, instead of simply taking the first step? How much energy do we waste trying to convince others of our viewpoint? when that energy could be better spent pursuing our goals. Nietzsche's philosophy reminds us that while words can be powerful, they are ultimately empty without the actions to back them up. This does not mean that Nietzsche dismissed the value of dialogue entirely. He recognized that there are times when debate is necessary, when it serves as a precursor to action or as a way to clarify one's thoughts. A well-reasoned argument can inspire, persuade, and even lead to meaningful change. However, Nietzsche warned against allowing argument to become an end in itself. When debate becomes a substitute for action, it loses its purpose and becomes a tool of the weak, a way to avoid the risks and responsibilities of decisive action. Consider the difference between two kinds of leaders. One spends their time in endless meetings and discussions, trying to build consensus and avoid controversy. The other makes bold decisions, confident in their instincts and unafraid of the consequences. While the first leader may seem cautious and thoughtful, Nietzsche would argue that their reliance on deliberation reveals a lack of true strength. The second leader, by contrast, embodies the kind of power Nietzsche admired, a power rooted in action, in the ability to assert one's will without hesitation. This emphasis on action is not just about leadership, it applies to every aspect of life. Think about the personal goals you've set for yourself. How often do you find yourself stuck in a loop of planning, researching, and preparing, without ever taking the first step? How often do you delay action because you're waiting for the perfect moment or trying to gather more information? Nietzsche's philosophy is a call to break free from this cycle. It's a reminder that no amount of planning or debating can substitute for the clarity and confidence that comes from simply doing. One of Nietzsche's most powerful lessons is that action itself is a form of argument, an argument that requires no words, no justification, and no explanation. When we act decisively, we make a statement about who we are and what we stand for. Our actions become the ultimate expression of our values and our will. In this sense, action is not just a means to an end. It is an end in itself. It is a way of affirming our existence and asserting our place in the world. This idea is especially relevant in today's world, where it is easier than ever to get lost in words. Social media has created a culture of endless debate, where people spend hours crafting the perfect post or comment to prove their point. While these debates can sometimes be enlightening, they often amount to little more than performative displays of intellectual or moral superiority. Nietzsche would likely view this as a tragic waste of energy, a distraction from the real work of living authentically and powerfully. The antidote to this, according to Nietzsche, is action. Instead of getting bogged down in arguments, we should focus on what we can do to make a difference. Instead of trying to convince others of our worth or our rightness, we should let our actions speak for themselves. This is not just about achieving goals. It's about living with integrity and confidence, trusting our instincts and embracing the risks that come with decisive action. For Nietzsche, the ultimate expression of strength is the ability to create one's own values and live by them without seeking approval or justification. This requires courage, the courage to act in the face of uncertainty, to take responsibility for one's choices, and to accept the consequences of one's actions. It requires a willingness to stand alone, to trust oneself, and to reject the need for external validation. This is not an easy path, but it is the path to true freedom and power. In the end, Nietzsche's philosophy is a call to action, not just in the literal sense of doing things, but in the deeper sense of living authentically and boldly. It's a reminder that the most powerful arguments are not the ones we make with our words, but the ones we make with our lives. When we act with conviction and integrity, we don't need to argue or explain ourselves. Our actions become their own justification, their own proof of our strength and worth. So, what does this mean for us? It means that instead of spending our time debating and justifying, we should focus on what truly matters, living our lives in a way that reflects our deepest values and instincts. It means trusting ourselves enough to take risks and make bold decisions, even when the outcome is uncertain. And it means recognizing that the greatest power we have is not in what we say, but in what we do. As Nietzsche might put it, stop talking and start living. The world doesn't need more arguments, it needs more action. As we come to the end of this exploration, let's return to the question that started it all. If you have to argue to prove your point, does that mean you're already weak? For Nietzsche, the answer was clear. Words, while powerful, often betray their wielder's insecurity when used as a substitute for action. The most compelling arguments are not spoken but lived. The strong do not need validation from others. Their actions stand as unshakable proof of their strength and conviction. In Nietzsche's view, this is the essence of authentic power, the ability to act decisively, to live boldly, and to create one's own values without seeking approval or justification. This philosophy is not just an abstract idea. It's a challenge to each of us to evaluate how we live our lives. Are we stuck in cycles of overthinking, endlessly debating our choices and justifying our beliefs? Or are we taking action, moving forward with clarity and purpose? Nietzsche's work urges us to break free from the paralysis of doubt and step into a life defined by instinct, courage, and decisive action. Take a moment to reflect on how this applies to you. Perhaps you've been hesitating over a decision, caught in the trap of weighing every option and anticipating every possible outcome. Nietzsche would tell you to trust your instincts and take the leap. Or maybe you've found yourself embroiled in arguments, trying to convince others of your worth or your ideas. Nietzsche would remind you that the most powerful way to make your case is not through words but through deeds. This message is particularly relevant in the digital age, where social media platforms have turned arguments into spectacles. Too often, we equate the number of likes, shares, or retweets with the strength of our ideas. But Nietzsche would see this as a dangerous illusion, a hollow pursuit of external validation that distracts us from the real work of living authentically and powerfully. Instead of getting lost in the noise, we should focus on what truly matters: our actions, our values, and the legacy we leave behind. At Philosophy Playground, we believe in the transformative power of ideas like these. Philosophy is not just about abstract theories or intellectual exercises. It's about changing the way we see the world and ourselves. Nietzsche's philosophy, in particular, is a call to action. It challenges us to live with greater courage, confidence, and authenticity, and it reminds us that the greatest power we have is the ability to shape our own lives. If this resonates with you, we invite you to join us on this journey. Philosophy Playground is more than a channel. It's a community of thinkers, dreamers, and doers who are passionate about exploring the big questions and finding practical ways to apply them to everyday life. If you found value in this discussion, we encourage you to take a moment to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue to create content that inspires and empowers. And here's something to think about as you go about your day. What's one action you can take right now? Something bold, something meaningful, something that reflects your deepest values? It doesn't have to be big, but it should be real. It should be something that moves you closer to the life you want to live. As Nietzsche might say, stop talking and start doing. The world doesn't need more arguments. It needs more action. Let your life be your ultimate argument, your most powerful statement of who you are and what you stand for. Thank you for being a part of Philosophy Playground. Until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and remember, the strongest arguments are the ones you live. We'll see you in the next video.